You'd think after nearly a decade together, you'd stop being surprised by the person sleeping beside you. But there I was, Thursday morning, mid-autumn light pouring through the kitchen window, listening to my wife tell me, in a tone that brooked no argument, that she was going to meet him for coffee. "He's in town," she said. "I'm meeting him for coffee, and it's not up for discussion." She actually said it just like that. Triple exclamation marks. Not literally, of course, but her voice, her tone, that was punctuation enough. She stood across from me, one hand gripping her phone like it might leap away if she loosened her grip. Her eyes were sharp, almost defiant, but not angry. That was the weirdest part. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a confession. It was just a line in the sand. And I remember thinking, huh? So this is where the road bends. I didn't say much back to her. Not right then. I just nodded slowly, leaned against the kitchen counter, and watched the steam rise from my coffee mug like it was trying to carry me with it. My name's Noah, by the way. And this was the moment I started to vanish. We'd been married 7 years by then. Together, even longer. And to most people, we were doing fine. 2 decent jobs. No kids yet, though not for lack of trying. A small house with a mortgage we were finally getting the better of. A dog that loved us both, and a circle of friends who invited us to dinner parties and camping trips. But if you pressed pause and rewound about 6 months before that morning, you'd start to see the hairline cracks. It began subtly. Missed calls. Conversations that ended mid-sentence because she got distracted. Weekend plans she started making without asking me. A new focus on her phone, and that little uptick in her wardrobe. The kind of changes that make you squint and wonder if you're being paranoid or just observant. I didn't say anything at first, partly because I didn't want to come across as insecure, and partly because, frankly, I didn't want to find out that the knot-eyed tide was already unraveling. So I waited. I told myself, she's just busy. We're both tired. This is just a phase. But deep down, I knew. I knew it when she came home late 2 Thursdays in a row and offered no real explanation. I knew it when I found a name in her texts, Ethan, and saw an entire thread wiped clean, except for a single out-of-place emoji in the preview bubble. I knew it when I asked casually who Ethan was, and she said, "Oh, just someone I knew back in college. No big deal." I should have pushed harder, but I didn't. I nodded. I smiled. I helped with the dishes and kissed her goodnight. And then came that morning. The morning she dropped the bomb like it was nothing. "He's in town. I'm meeting him. And it's not up for discussion." Like I was some overly possessive chaperone she had to announce her movements to. Like my role had been quietly downgraded from partner to background furniture. I watched her leave that morning. High boots, hair down. The kind of coat she only wore when she wanted to be noticed. She didn't say goodbye. Just walked out the door like she had every right to see whoever she wanted, however she wanted. And maybe she did. But that didn't mean I had to stick around for it. The thing about betrayal isn't just the act. It's the permission the other person gives themselves to hurt you. It's the quiet calculation you weren't invited to witness. And by the time they speak it aloud, they've already justified it. So when she came home that night, tired and glowing from whatever harmless coffee chat they'd had, because sure, let's call it just coffee, I was already gone. Not physically. Not yet. But gone in the way you can feel when someone turns off a light in a room you didn't know was still lit. She walked in, hung up her keys, and started chatting about the traffic. I didn't say much. I just handed her an envelope, unsealed, resting neatly on the kitchen table. Inside was our prenup. Signed, notarized, highlighted. She stared at it like it was a foreign language. Like she couldn't quite believe it was real. She didn't even sit down. She just stood there, blinking, lips parted slightly, like someone waking up from a dream mid-sentence. "You're giving this to me?" she finally asked. "No," I said. "I'm giving it back." There was silence after that, long enough that I heard the tick of the clock over the stove and the hum of the fridge. She was waiting for me to explain. I didn't. I wanted her to feel that silence. I wanted her to sit in it the way I had been sitting in mine for months. "You think I'm cheating on you?" she said after a while. It wasn't a denial. It was a dare. I shrugged. "Doesn't really matter what I think, does it? You told me it wasn't up for discussion." That's what stuck with me more than anything. Not the coffee. Not the name in the texts. Not the weird energy I'd felt building like static in the walls. It was that tone. That dismissive, final tone. It told me I didn't matter anymore. Not as a partner. Maybe as a roommate. Maybe as someone who paid half the bills. But not as a man whose heart she still respected. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I took a blanket to the guest room and laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow circles above me. I wasn't angry. Not in the shouting, punching walls kind of way. I was past that. What I felt was something closer to grief. Not for her, but for the version of myself I'd built with her. The man who planned vacations, who bought her flowers on random Tuesdays, who stayed up late editing her resume because she was nervous about a job interview. That guy, he didn't live here anymore. He packed up and moved out the moment she told me my opinion no longer counted. I didn't tell anyone at first. No big phone calls to my parents. No heart-to-hearts with my buddies over beers. I just started planning, quietly, methodically. I reviewed the prenup again. We'd signed it before we got married, both of us eager and idealistic. It wasn't even that complicated. We each kept what we came in with. Anything joint would be split 50-50. No alimony. No drawn-out fights. She'd insisted on it, actually. I just want us to be clear about expectations, she had said back then. It's not romantic, but it's honest. And it was. More honest than she realized. The next morning, she asked if we could talk. I said sure, but I didn't sit down. I stood, arms crossed, just listening. She tried to spin it. Said she needed closure with Ethan. Said they had history. That it was just coffee, and she was totally transparent about it. I didn't interrupt. Just let her talk herself into corners. Eventually, she asked, "Do you not trust me?" "No," I said plainly. "Not anymore." She looked genuinely hurt by that. And maybe she was. But trust isn't a vending machine. You don't punch the button and get it back just because you want it now. I told her I'd be leaving in a week. I told her I'd make the process clean, respectful, and legal. I told her I wouldn't make a scene. But I also told her she didn't get to rewrite the story just because the ending didn't suit her. And I meant it. Because the moment someone tells you your voice doesn't matter in your own marriage, you better believe them. They're not asking for understanding. They're asking for permission. And if you give it, they'll take a mile. So that's how it started. With coffee. With a sentence tossed casually into a quiet kitchen, like it didn't carry weight. Like the man she was talking to was optional. But I wasn't optional. And I wasn't staying. Not for coffee. Not for closure. Not for a woman who thought boundaries were just suggestions. The thing people don't really talk about when they leave isn't the moment they walk out. It's the moments leading up to it. The ones where you're still technically there, but you've already started packing your soul away in pieces. A drawer here. A suitcase there. A memory left behind in every corner you once thought was home. In that final week, the house was quiet. She tried. I'll give her that. Little things. Making dinner. Asking about my day. Lingering in the hallway with soft expressions that used to mean something. But there was a hesitance to it, like she knew the math wasn't adding up anymore. You don't pull away for months, then expect closeness to come running back because you cooked spaghetti. And honestly, I wasn't angry at her for trying. I was just done pretending it was enough. I think what finally broke her wasn't the prenup. It was my calm. The way I moved through that week like someone crossing a river he'd already drowned in. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I didn't cry or yell or fall apart. I just transitioned. Out of us. Out of we. And that scared her more than any screaming match ever could have. She came into the guest room one night, Tuesday, I think, holding 2 mugs of tea. Chamomile. Her go-to peace offering. She handed me one and sat on the edge of the bed like she was stepping into a confession booth. "I didn't think this would happen," she said quietly. "Not over something like coffee." I looked at her for a long second before I answered. "It's not about coffee. It never was." She looked confused. Or maybe she was pretending to be. Hard to tell, really. "It's about what coffee meant," I said. "About how easily you decided that I didn't get a say. That my comfort didn't matter. That I didn't matter." She tried to speak, but I kept going. Not out of anger. Just clarity. "Marriage isn't about permissions," I told her. "It's about consideration. You didn't tell me you were meeting an old friend. You announced it. You drew a line in the sand and dared me to cross it. And now you're surprised I stepped over it and kept walking." That was the end of it. No shouting. No scene. Just 2 people sitting in the quiet realization that something had died between them long before the paperwork ever showed up. I moved out that Friday. Not to some far-off place. Just to a small apartment on the other side of town. Enough space for me, a few boxes, and my thoughts. I left the big TV, the nicer couch, and the dog. Not because I didn't want him, but because he loved her more and I wasn't going to tear one more thing apart that didn't need breaking. I let her keep the house, too. She could afford it on her salary, especially now that the prenup guaranteed a clean split. And maybe, deep down, I wanted her to have to wake up in the same rooms where she'd started treating me like furniture. She called me once, about 2 weeks after I left. I didn't answer. She texted later that night. I just want to talk. No drama. Still didn't answer. Not out of spite. I just didn't see the point. You don't pour salt on a wound and then ask why it stings. And by then, the wound had started to scab. I wasn't going to scratch it open for old time's sake. Funny thing is, life got quiet after that. But not in a bad way. I started waking up without that heaviness in my chest. I made breakfast at my own pace, played music while I showered, went on long walks just because I could. I reconnected with a couple old friends. Not to vent, just to be. To exist around people who didn't make me feel like I was holding my breath all the time. People say heartbreak is loud. But sometimes, it's the silence that saves you. A few months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan had left town again. That nothing really came of it. Just 2 coffees and a couple of texts. I didn't ask for more details. Didn't want them. Because here's the thing. It wasn't about whether she slept with him. It was about how easy it was for her to risk our marriage on a reunion and a latte. That kind of disregard? That's what you can't come back from. A year passed. I didn't date for a while. Not because I was bitter, just because I needed to learn how to be me again. Not Noah the husband. Not Noah the guy who got left out. Just Noah. I got into hiking. Real hiking, not the Instagram kind. Just me, a pack, a trail, and the sound of trees deciding what kind of day they were having. It helped. Helped clear the noise. Helped remind me that I still existed outside of being someone's plan B. Eventually, yeah, I met someone new. We're taking it slow. I'm not rushing into anything because the world expects me to. I'm rebuilding, not with blueprints, but with instinct. And for the first time in a long time, I feel whole. Not because someone else fixed me, but because I stopped waiting for the person who broke me to care. I've thought about her now and then. Not in a longing kind of way. More like checking the weather in a city you don't live in anymore. Curiosity without investment. I hope she's okay. But I hope more that she learned something. About words. About boundaries. About what it means to say, it's not up for discussion when the person you're speaking to still thinks you're building a life together. Because when someone loves you, really loves you, they don't talk to you like you're optional. They don't put you in a corner and tell you to stay quiet while they chase nostalgia. They sit down. They talk. They listen. And if they can't, you hand them the prenup, walk out the door, and let the silence teach them what words never could. So yeah, maybe it was just coffee. But it was also the last straw. And sometimes, that's all it takes. A mug, a sentence, and a man who finally decides he deserves better